at this point, we have stopped the woe is Mississippi, and we've started betting on Mississippi, and I think that's making a world of difference.
This is Real State, a podcast from CSG South. Join us as we talk with policymakers and public leaders shaping state-level decisions across the South and explore how ideas move from policy to real impact.
Good morning and welcome to Real State. Today, we're talking about rural opportunity, from economic growth and workforce development to education and literacy. Across the South, rural revitalization has become one of the defining policy conversations of this decade. Not just about economic growth, but about whether communities can sustain opportunities across generations. In Mississippi, that conversation intersects directly with education and literacy. Mississippi has recently been highlighted in national news for literacy trends and educational reforms, reshaping how students read, learn, and prepare for success. In 2013, Mississippi ranked 49th nationally in fourth grade reading scores. Today, the state ranks 9th in the nation and leads the country in overall reading improvement. That kind of shift doesn't happen by accident. It reflects intentional policy decisions, and it's drawing national attention. Today, we have Mississippi Senator Rod Hickman, who serves on the Senate Education Committee, is an adjunct law professor, practicing attorney, great dad as well, and represents communities in Southwest Mississippi. You are a very busy man, so thank you for carving out the time, Senator.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
So let's start with your view on the big picture and work our way into the policy work that Mississippi has accomplished. When you look at Mississippi's trajectory, what does that progress signal to you about what's possible, particularly in rural communities, since that's largely your district?
Looking at the success that we've made, particularly in education, it just shows that when we invest in the right places, Mississippi can be successful at whatever we want to do. We made some very great investments into our public education system, and I mean, the dividends have been immeasurable. So I think Mississippi is definitely on an upward trajectory. We just need to, keep doing what we're doing. As you said in the intro, people from across the country are figuring out what Mississippi did. And some people have coined it the Mississippi miracle. Our teachers, while we love the publicity, they like for us to say the Mississippi Marathon, because it took time. It took a lot of hard work from a lot of people. And so it wasn't just an overnight miracle. It was, the legislative process, our Department of Education, all of these teachers putting in the work to make that happen. And for me, it's a good sign for rural America, because most of Mississippi, compared to the rest of the country, would be considered rural. And I'm a big proponent or a big stickler for looking at how we can help rural America, because rural America is so important to this country. And sometimes I often think that we've been forgotten or swallowed up by, the urban areas or what have you. But I think it's very important that people start back looking to rural Mississippi, rural America in general, because it's going to be important that these communities and these towns and villages are sustainable.
Absolutely. And at CSG, we often talk about the idea that education policy is economic policy, and literacy isn't just about test scores. It's about that long-term mobility that you mentioned. So I like that. I will adopt that Mississippi marathon when folks are asking me, because I have legislators from across the South asking me about what you all have accomplished and what you've done. And so I will start referencing the Mississippi Marathon as well instead of Mississippi Miracle, because it is that long-term mobility piece. So Mississippi's rise from 49th to 9th nationally in fourth grade reading is significant. But those literacy gains are only powerful if they translate into that long-term opportunity that we were kind of just getting into. So how do you see Mississippi's literacy improvements connecting to that rural workforce readiness over time?
Yeah, I think that, I've dealt with some economic development projects and stuff since I've been in the legislature. And one of the things that employees want to know is not only do we have a good economy, they want to know that we have the workforce that can actually do the job that needs to be done. And I think it all goes down to when you have a good education system and when you have things that are working, when you have people, it's as simple as people being able to read. Across this country, people are graduating high school and not really able to read at the level that they should. And that becomes important, whether you can do these post K through 12 certificate programs or trainings or get the degrees that you need to actually do the job. And so I think it's hand in hand. But not only that, another thing that people look to is when people want to move to a place, most people who have families, they want to make sure that there is a good education system. So being able to have these metrics and being able to assure this readiness and long-term growth. I wasn't here in 2013 in particular. I've been along the journey in a part of the journey, but we picked that age because that's the most pivotal age, the most pivotal grade to make sure that children are not left behind and they are learning or they have the literacy component at the third grade. So that, again, it speaks so much to future success. And so that's why we've chosen that. And I think it goes all the way into the workforce. People want to know that you have an educated workforce that can actually do what needs to be done.
And I don't know the exact stat, but I've heard that third grade literacy and just education is so pivotal. And to your point, it really can point to their trajectory of not just only workforce, but even in the correction system. And it really is an indicator for their potential future. Ensuring kids don't become statistics and they become success, I think, is really what y'all have honed in on this. So we're seeing other states across the South studying, and really across the country, studying Mississippi's approach to early literacy reform. So from reading coaches to evidence-based instruction, can you just kind of talk us through what you think Mississippi got right in its literacy strategy? And particularly if any of strategies are really geared toward the rural communities, rural districts, or if it's just all over the state.
I think all those things that you mentioned helped us get it right. I think like literacy coaches and having this uniform curriculum brought everybody to the table at the basis and made sure that everyone had what they need. I think the literacy coaches, in my opinion, far and beyond was a huge part of that equation. That was a huge part of the strategy because in a classroom, 16 to 20 some odd students, you're going to have a couple of students that's on this level. You're going to have few students here. You're going to have some students down here. So to be able to have not just a teacher in the classroom, but a literacy coach who can go in and say, look, I can help this student get what they need. This student needs a little more individualized, loving care or whatever. And to be able to do that, I think was vital and important. I also think that, a lot of people, they are not a fan of having so many tests and things like that, but you cannot measure what you have not tested or what you have not compared. And so I think that having those testing components in there are absolutely important. A lot of people, were really, really like up at arms when we start to do that. But I think they're seeing that the results are working because not only like children are testing early, they're testing with a test that matters. And so there's so many long-term effects that's like, easing test anxiety the earlier we're doing this. And there are some people, we understand, there are some people who struggle and all this, but that's why, again, we have literacy coaches. We have so many opportunities for them to do it. I think the system has worked really well. And at the time, we didn't know. We put our trust and we invested in something that we thought would work, but we had no way of knowing, and it paid off. Again, I have to go back to, it wasn't just the people in this building. It wasn't just the Department of Education. It really was those people on the grounds, those teachers, those literacy coaches that we put our trust in and made investment into them. And they've invested into the children of Mississippi. And again, the ROI is through the roof.
And literacy is a part of it, but also y'all's math scores have considerably increased as well. And so from your perspective as a policymaker and a professor, what are the next steps to ensure these gains reach every community and continue to go and that marathon just continues to run?
So I actually sat on like the committee. We've changed our accountability metrics for school districts and schools because the trigger has been hit, and our trigger, like if a certain amount of our school districts are a certain level, and then we go in and we readjust our accountability standards. We've done that because we believe that as we grow, our accountability standards should grow. And so that's one thing that we've done. But this year we've implemented somewhat of a math math gate, or kind of the same approach we took with literacy. We've done that in math. And so, well, we haven't done it yet. It's actually going through the legislative process that we want to do something very similar for math. And we've seen other states take our model for literacy and they translate it into math. So we're actually following some other states on what they've done regarding math. And so I think that we just have to keep watching. And, somebody said in a committee meeting, and I loved it, that if we give our students a tool, or if we trust them, or we invest in our students, they're going to be up to the challenge. And so the more we challenge them, the more we require them to come up to our accountability standards, they're just going to outperform every single time. And so at this point, we have stopped the woe is Mississippi, and we've started betting on Mississippi. And I think that's making a world of difference.
I love that. Well, reading and math literacy is the foundation, but workforce alignment is where education translates into economic impact. So I want to thread that needle just a little bit and move from, just into how education feeds that workforce pipeline. So you've worked on legislation connecting education to real world skills, including efforts around financial literacy and post-secondary readiness. So how do you view the connection between early literacy, high school preparation, and long-term workforce participation?
Yeah, I think it all ties in together. If we can give our students the fundamentals, they can go out and be successful at whatever they want and need to do. When I was graduating high school, the thing was to go to a 4-year college, get a degree, and go and make millions of dollars was the idea. And that's not the case anymore. And there are some really, really, really smart, intelligent young people who said, look, I don't want to go to a 4-year college. I want to pick up a trade, or I want to do this, and I want to go out and be in the real world. And so translate by giving our students a proper base, they can go out and do whatever they want to. We still need researchers, we need PhDs, we need all of these, but we also need people who are doing real skills, who are staying in our communities and staying home. One of the things I'm really, really, really big on, and it is my passion as a legislator and in life in general, is having people remain in the rural communities that birthed them. Because a lot of times, unless you've been in a really rural place, I don't think people understand when we say, like, for many of us, success is defined by getting out. And I wish we could change that stigma. Like, you can stay in Sugar Lock, Mississippi, and still be successful if you want to. And you can go. I'm not saying, like, hey, if the city's calling you, go to the city. But I think we need to remove the stigma of, like, oh, they made it, they got out, they made it. No, it's like they wanted to go, so they left, and that's fine. But also, like, they stayed and they are successful. That creates success. And so that's a large part of it. And I said that a long way around to say people who get trades and people who traditionally go from high school into like a trade program or straight into work, those are the people who tend to stay around and raise families and do those types of things. So I think it's vital and important. But Mississippi's also, at this point, we have a couple of different diploma path types, and some of them are leaning very heavily on workforce development. And we found that a lot of times, even in my career, a lot of it's on the job training. So if employers know that you have the base, that they can then get you and do your training, or you get a 6-month certificate, that works. One of the other things that I don't think is there that I do in my law practice, I do represent a community college. So I kind of see the work there. And we've been able to partner with developments and offer a carved out class just for this project that's coming here, or for this manufacturer, or for this entity that's coming here. And we've been able to carve out 6-month class. We teach it on our campus and do these types of things. So I said all that to say, we can give them the base. If our students are performing at the level of everyone across this country when they graduate the 12th grade, a lot of these jobs, the training is easy beyond that, but it's just having capacity.
And I think that's your story too. I mean, you could live anywhere and go do anything. And I know that you moved out of your hometown for a little while, and then you came back, and it's just always called you back. And I think that's part of your personal story that you've shared with me before as well. So I love that. That's not just a fairy tale that, if people want to stay, they can and be successful. That's truly your lived experience. So I love that you bring that into the work that you're continuing to do, and you are so close with your family, and it's just really wonderful to see. And when you find those $1 million paying jobs, please let me know. Bring me with you. Bring me with you.
I, you're the first call I'm
There you
making.
go. Well, in Southwest Mississippi, the workforce needs look different than those in metro areas. So, where do you see the most pressing workforce gaps in your district or across Mississippi right now in some of those rural communities? Just
A lot of it is just opportunity. But everybody wants to um, everybody wants to have a dignified lifestyle and dignified life. People want to work. A lot of it is just opportunity. Even in my campaign, I've said this from day one, and I still believe it until now. Mississippi's greatest resources is people. Our people just need an opportunity to shine, and when we do that, we can. And so, a lot of it is opportunity. A lot of it is government having to make the investment that they need. Because again, I look into economic development. I want to make sure rural areas prosper, and a lot of it comes down to having the workforce, and then two, having the infrastructure for things to be where they need to be. And so I think a lot of it is opportunity, just having the ability to work. Like, there are people in my community that wake up every morning, leave their house at 4 o'clock, and get back at like 7 or 8 because they're driving 2 hours to work every morning and 2 hours back home every day. And so again, a lot of it's just opportunity near home, and that puts a drag on anyone. And the other thing is, like, these opportunities could come, but our state and local government, all these places, have to make the investment in the right places. Like, one of the things is like site development. People want to come in and be able to put shovel to ground when they have these economic developments. And so infrastructure is important, and getting all that done. I think that's where the state and, again, government comes in making sure that these places are prepared, when we have these opportunities to come. So I think the biggest disconnect is that, because I think we have the ability. One of the things I want to brag on Mississippi way before this, I think we have one of the best community college systems in the country. And so we've always had the ability to, on the spot, if Lindsey say, I want to open Lindsey Manufacturing or whatever in Mississippi, before you get Lindsey Manufacturing off the ground, our community college will have trained your workforce that you need. And so again, I said this 26 times at this point now. I think it goes back to opportunity. That's the biggest disconnect, is our people having those opportunities for them.
And I'm going to hone in on opportunities and training workforce and move into the infrastructure conversation that you're having. So Mississippi has been expanding career and technical education pathways, also known as CTEs, and strengthening community college partnerships. And you've seen that directly in your district and been a part of that. So what does effective CTE look like in a rural district, and how do we ensure it truly aligns with employer demand? I mean, you were kind of getting at it with Lindsey Manufacturing, but I'd love to just hone in on some of the real world experiences that you've seen at the community colleges that you're partnering with.
So I love that, because that's why I say I think we have one of the best community college systems. One of the things I found our community colleges are doing with major employers in the area, they're asking them, like, hey, what do you need? And they're adopting and bringing in those programs and training people on that. Like, if you need welders, we're going to start a welding class. If you need HVAC people, we're starting HVAC classes. And so that's been one of the things and that's why I say our community colleges have this ability to adjust. I'm glad you asked that question, because one of our community colleges and one of our high schools in my district, just so happens that the CTE director at the high school and the community college CTE, they're husband and wife.
Wow.
And so they took a trip, and I can't remember, I wish I could remember what country. They took a trip, and it may have been Germany. Ding. They took a trip to a country and looked at what they're doing with their basically training in community college. And what they came up with is that the reason why a lot of them are successful is they have direct partnerships, and where in your high school CTE, you're taking basically phase 1 of your certification. And then when you get to the community college, you're already in phase 2, and you have a very trained employee on exactly what you need. And I think that's what community college, not community, I think that's what trade the trade industry needs to work like. The CTE in high school should get you a phase one of something, whether it's welding, carpentry, HVAC, all of that. You go in a very skilled student already, and you finish this last however much time you need to finish. I think that's a perfect example of how to make, our community college systems, our trade and CTE actually work, and giving students those opportunities, because a lot of people now, they know what they want to do way more than I ever knew what I wanted to do, like when I was in high school. So giving them those opportunities to do this, I think is important.
And we are seeing that Europe model that you're referencing. Lots of policymakers are talking about that, and around credentialing or micro credentialing and apprenticeships and CTEs, and just how it all works together, and helping someone move through that faster, but also making sure that they are fully trained and all the important needs that they need to know. And another benefit that you just pointed out is in those rural, smaller communities, you likely know the person very closely that you could work with and partner with in order to make something like this happen so much faster. And so that's another benefit of those rural communities. So one of the persistent challenges in rural states with rural communities, which largely is the South too, is not just preparing talent, but retaining it. So what policies help ensure that students who benefit from improved literacy or workforce training can build careers in their home communities?
That's one of, I'll start by saying thank you. I feel like a pageant girl. Thank you for that question. But that is the $1 million question, and it's something I've poked at ever since I got in the legislature. How do we retain our talent? How do we keep our best and our brightest? Because I know that I go to any major city in this country, and of course I go to conferences, all that kind of stuff. I travel, and I'm always running into somebody that's from Mississippi that's like very high up in whatever they're doing, because it shows that we have the talent. And I'm sure every rural state can say the same, but of course I'm from Mississippi, so I see it. And my question always is like, how do you keep these talents here, and what can you do? And I'm sorry, I don't know the answer, but some of the things that I've worked on, like this year, and this year I called it a conversation starter. Rural Mississippi is struggling with like legal assistance, like lawyers. We're all of our lawyers are in basically Jackson or on the coast or in North Mississippi, and our rural areas don't have lawyers. Like take my county, for instance. There are 3 attorneys in my county. Me and the other 2 are over 70. One doesn't take any matters that's going to require him to go to court. He only does like transactional land work and stuff like that. And the other one is not a resident. He lives like an hour away. He comes in. And so that's it for legal representation in my entire county. And so that's one of the things that I've kind of been really looking at. And I dropped some legislation this year that would create like basically a rural lawyers program where it would provide stipends for people who went into an area that's deemed to be rural and started practice, and if they stayed there 5 years. Basically, it would provide a loan. If they stayed there 5 years, the loan would be forgiven. In XYZ. I think we just have to invest in rural areas. I don't know. I haven't thought of any other way except the state and other entities, and whether that be public-private partnerships or whoever, saying we want to put our money where our mouth is. And if rural America is important, we've got to invest in rural America. But we also have to invest in the people that are staying there, that are doing the work, that are providing the services, and all of those types of things. And I think that's going to be the crux. We've got to make the investment. And whether that is in like having data-driven research done, or if that is creating programs like apprenticeships and paid, programs for people to start whatever they need in their rural communities outside of like lawyer. And Mississippi has a great like rural physician program and stuff like that. So we're trying, but I don't have the ultimate answer. But I do say that it is something. I won't necessarily say it keeps me up at night, but it worries me at the direction that rural America, it has continued to decline. And I don't think people understand that unless we do something, these communities won't be able to just support themselves. And this country needs rural America. Like we're producers. We provide, we pour into the economy. We do all these things, and so it's important that we do that. And so, hey, if anybody's listening, y'all come help me figure out what we need to do and help me find the answer to this
And
question.
we are hearing a lot about that. Rural physicians that came up in episode one with Speaker Burns out of Georgia. We are hearing a lot about rural veterinarians, particularly large farm animals. We're hearing concerns about
Yes.
accountants in rural areas that they're and lawyers, as you just mentioned. So that is absolutely a trend that we're continuing to see, not just with physicians and nurses, but with those other practices that individuals need. And you gave a perfect example of only 3 attorneys in a whole county, and then how limited in scope that they can be. So the next kind of section of what I wanted to talk about is also about that infrastructure piece. So rural revitalization is not just about that workforce pipeline that we were just talking about, but it's about whether communities have stability and infrastructure to support that opportunity. So you represent a region with deep cultural and economic roots. And what are constituents telling you about the biggest barriers to stability, whether it's healthcare access or housing or broadband or infrastructure? So that other piece of it not just being a workforce pipeline issue, but also
Yeah.
just quality of life and competitiveness.
Yes, I
Yes.
think all of that. But when I think about it, like if I had to hone in on something in that, one, it is housing. Housing is the issue, I think, everywhere for everyone. And the lieutenant governor put together a study committee on housing over the summer, and we looked into what some of the issues are, and we found that that's deeply connected to our infrastructure problem. Is that like I found that even in my small town, you can be right across the highway and we can't provide you water because it's going to cost us $50 11 million to get across this highway to get you water. And so people are having to dig wells. And so nobody is going to, not everybody's going to have the ability to dig their own personal well. And that's adding thousands of dollars of cost before the shovel ever hits the ground, is getting those utilities there. And so one of the things I also looked into this year, I was fortunate enough, our housing chairman actually won mayor of the city of Jackson. And in this new shakeup of committees, Lieutenant Governor made me the chairman of our housing committee. And one of the things that we've looked at is the state putting together basically like an infrastructure grant for developments. And it will require a public-private partnership, like a local municipality or water district could apply for these funds along with a private partner who's either going to do a development, a housing development there, or economic development that's coming in. And it was like a 40-60 match. Like the local government and the private entity needed to come up with the 40%, and then we match it at the state level at a low interest rate, 20-year loan, so that they could build development of housing and stuff like that. And one of the things that we did in that piece of legislation, we also added that if you took advantage of this revolving loan pool, you couldn't restrict lot size and house size. And what we found, even in rural communities, a lot of places are restricting lot sizes and house sizes. And that's what's contributing to this housing crisis. I think that's across the country. And so that's something that we're looking into. That also was a conversation started piece. A lot of things that require money around this place, you got to work on them for a long time because you got to find the money. You got to do all those things. So it started a very important piece of the conversation. But I think housing everywhere is ultimately an issue, but also aging infrastructure, in that, a lot of our water systems and stuff, they're crumbling. Like I have this rural water association that that is something that kind of keeps me up at night, because I think one leak and you got hundreds of people that are without water for a long time because they don't have the money in their treasury. They just run old school, so they haven't upped their rates since the 80s, so they don't have money. But also the whole system is so aged that one, and I say a water leak, that's facetious, but one major thing happening could put these people without water. I'm not talking for a day or two. I'm talking like ever, almost. Like they got to redo the whole thing. So those kind of things bother me because, again, we have an aging infrastructure. And at a time, rural America was booming, and we're not so much anymore. And so you need the money to fix these things and upgrade these things. And a lot of people didn't have the foresight to do the maintenance or whatever was needed to be done at that time. So there are some persisting issues with rural America. And unfortunately, I don't know if policy work is really what's the cure for that. More of we need to put some economic resources in these areas if we want them to thrive.
Yeah, Mississippi, I mean, rural competitiveness. This is beyond just Mississippi. This is every state, right? That rural competitiveness definitely goes beyond just employment numbers, as you were talking about. And these initiatives, like you've discussed today, require both public and private alignment. So our and you've talked about a couple, but these are bipartisan issues. Are you seeing support from across the aisle for both sides, both parties, and momentum around policies that support rural communities or efforts, initiatives? To your point, it's not always just policy. Are you seeing that momentum from both sides of the aisle to work together and come together on this?
Absolutely. I think that, everybody in this building, I mean, had touched rural Mississippi some type of a way. I would say 90% of the people in this building represent a portion of some rural part of this state. And so everybody's concerned. I think a part of it is, and it doesn't matter from which side of the aisle, it's just that, let's be honest, in Mississippi, the Republicans are the majority until they control the checkbook. And I think even if we were in the majority and had the checkbook, you have a infinite number of resources. And so the question is whether you care enough to pull from an already strained purse to invest in this particular thing in that area. And that is where we're starting to, most of the things I mentioned, I said our conversation started, we're starting to start the conversation. And I think people are listening, saying, yeah, we're going to have to do something. And maybe this year's just not the year. And so I don't want to say that people aren't listening, people aren't caring. It's just a matter of, if I have a light bill, a water bill, a phone bill, a Wi-Fi bill, a car note, and my mortgage due, which thing am I going to pay first? And it's a matter of putting the issues in rural Mississippi to the top of the list. And that's what I'm trying to do. And again, it's not a partisan thing. It's absolutely far from partisan, because, I mean, most rural areas actually are Republican and not even Democrat. And so it's far from partisan. But I'm just trying to make sure that I get the right people to elevate rural communities to this level, and where they become, this is the first bill I'm going to pay.
For rural America to succeed over the next decade, what do you think will be the defining education to economy connector? Now, I know that is a loaded question, and I'm asking for one defining thing for a complex and multi-layered topic. But if you just were to pull one thing, one priority out that you think would really move the needle for that education to economy connector, what would that be from your perspective?
Just off the bat, at first thought, I think it's going to be like real financial literacy. I absolutely think that if we're going to have an economy that thrives, we have to have people who understand money and how it works. And if individuals are thriving, then the economy as a whole is thriving. So I think that personal investment in financial literacy, so people understand, because the more burdens that I am able to bear for myself, the less that I have that's spread among society. And so having that financial literacy piece, I think, helps every economy in general. And it goes to having all of the things. I mean, I'm an attorney by profession. And so looking at that, just having financial literacy and people having all the things they need, like insurance is one of the examples, like having car insurance. Society didn't have to bear the burden of someone getting hurt. We can take care of that ourselves if we have insurance. And that all comes down to financial literacy, is having enough money to pay all the things you need to pay, having enough money to, or being able to use the money in a way that it sustains you and you're taking care of all of your needs and that. So I think the best connector to the economy and education is making sure that we're teaching financial literacy and we're teaching people how to use money, because money spends different now. I mean, it's just a reality of it. I need a financial literacy class the way this economy is looking.
And I remember coming out of high school and they used to teach us how to balance a checkbook and do things like that. And I'm not sure that that's happening anymore. So,
A
oh
checkbook.
no, what is that? I know I get laughed at for that too. Do we even write checks anymore? I still have a checkbook, but
I still have a checkbook, but I'm saying, like, I'm thinking about like young people, a
I know.
checkbook. If I handed like people coming out of high school now a checkbook, they'd be like, "What is this
Yes.
thing?" Like, it'd probably be a new TikTok, like handing people a checkbook saying, "Hey, do you know what this is? Can you fill this out?"
It will eventually hit a museum along with all the pennies, and it just be a relic. And that will be something we tell our kids and grandkids about one day.
There was this thing called a checkbook.
So, to kind of round this out, and before I move into my signature question, people are watching Mississippi with literacy, and so financial literacy is wrapped in there too. But in this transferable model, I mean, they're all looking at Mississippi as a potential transferable model because of the great numbers that y'all have had. So, kind of going back to that, what lessons would you share with other state policymakers from your experience in Mississippi with that? If they call and they ask, or when you see them at the Southern Legislative Conference this July, what would you tell them about your experience around boosting your numbers and this whole conversation? What advice would you give?
Um, First is very cliche, but I absolutely mean it. Believe in our kids. Like, sometimes we have to make the hard decisions, but trust that they will rise to the occasion. And secondly would be, believe in your teachers. Teachers are incredibly amazing people. They get up every day and they go out there and they do a job that most of us could not do. And so believe in them, trust in them, make sure they have the resource and the tools necessary. Again, I wasn't here in 2013, but I heard it was a very scary time. Like, people didn't know what was going to happen, if this was going to work, if we're going to mess up our kids and all of that. But Mississippi took a bet and we made some hard decisions. And so sometimes you have to make very hard decisions. But I would say the biggest thing is to use evidence-based information, use the data, look at the data, know what works for your state and for your area. And again, bet on your children and bet on your teachers, and I promise you won't be on the wrong side.
Well, thank you for staying focused on the long-term outcomes, even when short-term pressures can dominate. I know, especially during the legislative session, that is a very real theme for all legislators. Are those kind of short-term pressures, but staying focused on that long game, betting on your children. I think that's a great message.
Every everything that we do around here is like gonna either like blow up the world or change the world for the better. And most of the time it just moves the needle a little bit. And as long as we're going the right direction, we're okay. But you're absolutely right. Like, we're here for 3 months and everything is earth shattering during these 3 months, but we're really looking toward long term, generational and sustainable
Yeah.
things.
Well, to close out the podcast, I've been asking our state leaders this signature question. So, what's the best piece of professional advice you've ever received, and how does it influence the way you lead today?
That's easy.
Oh,
So I think, I don't know if it's the best piece of like professional advice ever, but since I was a legislator, so I'm gonna go there. And it actually, no joke, not buttering up CSG South, but it came from cows. And I lead with this every day, is always assume positive intent from the people that you're working with. And it has literally been my guiding star as a legislator, especially being in a minority party. And I now look at my chamber and I always say 99% of these people in here, 99% of the time, want to make Mississippi better. We just disagree on how to do it. And I'm looking at whatever anybody in this chamber is doing, that there's a positive intent behind it. Their worldview just may be different than mine. And we're probably trying to solve the same problem. They just see it different than I see it. And it has allowed me to always see my colleagues as individuals and humans and the issue as the issue. And we can have a heated, drag out debate on the floor, and I can still go to dinner. I can still talk to people. I can still share coffee because I now have always assumed positive intent until I'm shown otherwise. And so I think that has been like a guiding light for me in the legislature. And I think it has been a big part of my success in that I'm able to work with anybody on any issue at any time. And I think people around me have recognized that, leadership recognizes that. And I'm not this ultra sore person in the corner because I lose. We lose a lot. We're the minority. But at the end of the day, I always assume that my colleagues, they have a positive intent for what they're doing. We just disagree on how to do it. And maybe their way will work. And maybe Mississippi will be better, even if I disagree with it on the onset.
We get to see that among so many states where, like you said, you may have a heated policy debate and disagree on how to get there, but at the end of the day, y'all are still colleagues and clinking glasses and having dinner, and you know each other's families. And that's something that I think is an unknown about the state legislatures, that is
Yes.
truly something we see among all of our states is happening. And so sometimes the media would like for us to believe otherwise, or maybe it's different on the federal level, but on the state level, I see it every day. It's one of the benefits, wonderful benefits of my job. So I'm glad that you brought that to the forefront, and I'm glad you learned that advice at Cal's. That warms my heart.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, to wrap us up, Mississippi's story, particularly in literacy and the workforce pipeline in rural communities, is drawing national attention, and your work at the intersection of education and rural opportunity is an important part of that story. So, Senator Hickman, thank you for this thoughtful conversation, sharing your perspectives and your passion for the people in the communities you serve and your service in the state government.
Thank you for having me.
I love that you carved out the time. Thank you so much. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. We will continue exploring the leadership decisions and policy choices shaping state government across the South. More episodes are available at csgsouth.org. I'm Lindsey Gray. Let's keep it real.
Thank you for joining us today on Real State, where we keep it real about what really matters.